Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about the 20th year of Dungeons & Dragons history, 1993, all right? And we're going to look at that 20th year of history, 1993, in the history of Dungeons & Dragons through the filter of clear, catalyst, location, entity, artifact, and relationship. Okay, so in 1993, just to be clear, the game is going into its heyday, right? And it's been around for 20 solid years. It has 2 decades of life racked up, and it is past the satanic panics of the 80s. It's weathered some of its most challenging times, and some of its most vehement challengers have been shown to be wrong, right? And just by time and evidence, and the game's standing on its own 2 feet, and it's selling well, and TSR is a healthy company, and the game is a healthy game, and there are FLGSs all over the United States. The game has an international following, and I just wanted to take a moment to just recognize in 1993 you're really looking at one of the heydays of Dungeons & Dragons, right? It's doing extremely well at this point, right? Now, who is our catalyst for 1993? Our catalyst is Mark Reinhagen, and he is the creator for World of Darkness. He had originally, and for this year specifically, he has Werewolf out, and he also has Vampire out. And this is a very big deal for Dungeons & Dragons. Mark Reinhagen is absolutely a catalyst for Dungeons & Dragons. And the reason why is Mark Reinhagen has brought Dungeons & Dragons rules, polyhedral dice, traditional tabletop role-playing game rules, with some differences, right? Like one of the things is the World of Darkness rules only use D10s, right? They don't use the full sweep of dice. So there's some variation, some innovation happening here, but this is still people gathering around a table using core rule books that are exactly the same size and dimensions as Dungeons & Dragons. Polyhedral dice, 1 game master, multiple players. It's the same structure, right? But Mark Reinhagen is taking that structure and saying, we don't need any fantasy world. We can do a modern setting. And this captures the zeitgeist of the 90s. People are very in and very down for this really drastically different direction that the World of Darkness games are going. And they're saying, let's explore. And Mark Reinhagen has brought a game that Dungeons & Dragons in many ways does not really supply, which is let's explore very directly modern topics and modern relevancies. Let's deal with some mature content, right? Let's have romance very directly in the game. Let's have politics in the game very directly, right? And there isn't a remove for it that exists in the Dungeons & Dragons game. And the World of Darkness games really zip along. They're running right alongside, and Mark Reinhagen is just looking over and smiling at TSR at this point and saying, hey, look at the success I'm having with the same structure you have, but I'm going in a different direction setting wise. And it also, looking back now, just trying to communicate to you what this looked like. In some ways, now it doesn't look like this way at all today, but in some ways, you had your D&D nerds, rolling up and playing elves and, slaying goblins, and you have your cool kids over here going, well, I'm the Prince of Philadelphia, I'm the Vampire Prince of Philadelphia. And also, you're also just now seeing, and World of Darkness would be the game where LARP becomes, LARP is cemented into the hobby, right? And LARPing, live action role playing, would become so cemented into the hobby in the early 90s and the late 90s that many muggles, normies, they won't really understand the difference between Dungeons & Dragons and LARPing. Like that LARPing is fairly rare within the Dungeons & Dragons community, and that in reality what you're seeing, but it was very common within the World of Darkness community. And also, just to be clear, when young people saw World of Darkness in the beginning, like it really was dramatically different and nothing like it had ever been seen. And so at this point, these LARPs start, and LARPs really are, hey, your girlfriend just kissed my girlfriend, but was that in character or out of character? I don't know. Like LARPing introduces a huge number of really strange and very different questions and problems for the tabletop role-playing game community, right? And things that people had never even thought of. And looking back now, there's like people kind of think of LARPing as not cool, but at the end of the day, it was, right? So it's just understand that, right? So Mark Reinhagen is absolutely a catalyst for Dungeons & Dragons, because Dungeons & Dragons is heads down. They are creating their fantasy worlds. They are creating more and more settings. Mystara, and Spelljammer, and Faerun, and Dark Sun, and all these exciting settings are coming out, but it's all fantasy based, right? And Mark Reinhagen is like, there's an entire fantasy world right here in our modern world that you guys have left untouched, right? And at this point too, TSR is like, are we doing it right? To stay focused and say, okay, well, we have the #1 tabletop role-playing game in the world, but should we be, thinking about other types of TRPG innovation, or should we remain focused? And this is a big question, right? So it's really a big question. So Mark Reinhagen is absolutely the catalyst for 1993. What is our location for 1993? Well, our location for 1993 is Cologne, Germany, right? So Germany, right? This city in Germany, you absolutely see Dungeons & Dragons, and World of Darkness games are heading over there too. But you see, Dungeons & Dragons is huge in Germany. And one of the things that Germany will do is they are an all-in country on tabletop role-playing games. Germany says, I see your Dungeons & Dragons, and I raise you Zweihander, like other games, right? So here's the thing. There are German tabletop role-playing games now being played in 1993 in Germany that I can't tell you about. And one of the reasons why is many of them are only published in Germany, right? In German, right? And never come to the US. And this is unusual because while Dungeons & Dragons is being officially translated into other languages and very unofficially translated into other languages, and is making its way internationally across the world, right? What Germany is saying, we see your Dungeons & Dragons, we're playing it, but we're so down with this hobby that we're going to create stuff for our own nation in our own native language that we don't even care if it goes anywhere else in the world. We don't care if Americans get to play this. This is just for us. And so Germany to this day will be one of the most dedicated and all-in countries on tabletop role-playing games. And to this day, there are incredibly robust, healthy groups of tabletop role players, really, really vibrant FLGSs in Germany that carry every tabletop role-playing game on the sun they can get a hold of that's in German, and many of them even play in English, right? But Germany is all in. They're like, yeah, we're gonna try to rival the US for vibrancy and robustness of the tabletop role-playing game hobby, and they do. Like Germany is, we're proud to see them as another country that is just like the US, that takes TRPGs very, very seriously and has a robust, beautiful tabletop role-playing game community, right? And so Cologne, Germany is our location, and the game is being played at kitchen tables in Cologne, Germany by the hundreds, and just games, games on weeknights, games on weekends, extended campaigns that are now 5-10 years old, right? All that's happening in Germany just like it's happening in the US, and they're challenging American passion for the hobby itself. It's very exciting, right? So who is our entity for 1993? Well, our entity for 1993 is Jeannie Leavitt. Now, Jeannie Leavitt is the first U.S. fighter pilot, IRL, in real life. She is the first U.S. Air Force fighter pilot. And so this is a woman who's going into a combat role using a multi-million-dollar vehicle that the U.S. military has carefully built, carefully maintained, and that has coveted spots, right? So this is 1993, and you are seeing you're seeing a woman take on fully a combat role, right? And this points over to Dungeons and Dragons, which in 1E and 2E still has distinctions between male and female player characters. And so Jeannie Leavitt, her accomplishment of becoming the first U.S. fighter pilot points to Dungeons and Dragons going, what are you guys doing over there? And it would lead to what we have today in 5th edition, where when you choose your player character, your gender is completely non-mechanical. It has nothing to do with your attributes, right? Saying very clearly in Dungeons and Dragons that women are as capable as combat as men are as capable of combat, which is the statement that the U.S. military is trying to make and then turn into reality, right? So Jeannie Leavitt is pointing toward a more diverse game, right? She's pointing toward a more diverse real world and more diversity within Dungeons and Dragons. So Jeannie Leavitt is the entity for 1993. What is our artifact for 1993? Our artifact for 1993 is the 2nd edition Monster Manual, right? Now, the 2nd edition of the Monster Manual has improved art. It also has honed, refined monsters and additional monsters that didn't exist within the 1st edition of the game. It also will have a very professional approach to copyright, right? Like all the monsters, some of the monsters in 2nd edition are completely unique to Dungeons and Dragons, and then some of the monsters are just based off of myth. But where the game had overreached in the 1st edition and actually included monsters in the game that the licenses for were not fully held by Dungeons and Dragons, in 2nd edition there's a paying of attention saying, we are a real company. This isn't at the design level, right? This is Dungeons and Dragons is a hobby at the Dungeon Master level, and it is a hobby at the player level. But at the design level, this isn't a hobby anymore, and it really was in first edition. It was a business, but those guys were having a ton of fun, and they were just it was a passion project. But now in 1993, the game is very much a professional product, and copyright is being taken, and TSR says we own this intellectual property. This intellectual property is valuable and special, and we want people to respect it, right? And at the same time, we're going to respect the intellectual property, other people's intellectual property, and be very careful what goes into the game. So the Monster Manual also completes the 2nd edition of core rulebooks, right? The 2nd complete edition, right? So in 1993, it is now possible to have 1E, 2E, 3. You can have PHB DMG Monster Manual 1E, right? You can have PHB DMG Monster Manual 2E. You can have 2 sets of fully refined rules, right? And everybody's using the 2nd edition rules, and at the macro level, there's a few people who aren't, but at the macro level, the 2nd edition rules have been embraced, and people are just using these books like crazy. And there are tons of full-bore, incredibly detailed games that are being built where every word in the PHB, the DMG, and the MM matters, right? And so the MM, the 2nd edition MM, stands as a capstone for an incredibly important achievement within Dungeons & Dragons, which is saying, we have written these rules, and then we have written them again, and what you are playing with now is an incredibly finely honed, crafted set of rules that we have invested time and value and really carefully built, right? And the Monster Manual is beautiful, and there's hundreds of monsters in it, and there has been a ton of time and attention on how much damage they do, the balance that they are, that is, what does it, The hit points are balanced. Their attacks are balanced. There are, there are challenge ratings, and there's just been a ton of time and attention, right, put into this. And by creating the second edition monster manual, Dungeons & Dragons has really grown up into this very mature, very professional product. And it's really special, and it's a beautiful thing. And it says to the entire community, we're here, and we're staying. And we're staying, and we want this to be special for you. And it's really a wonderful thing. So that is in place, and the monster manual, this 2E monster manual, completing again all 3 core rule books as a new edition, as a playable edition, is just a huge milestone in Dungeons & Dragons history and in tabletop role-playing game history. All right. What is the relationship for Dungeons & Dragons in 1993? Well, the relationship is heritage, right? Now, I'm using the modern term, and I'm going to say once the regular term. So, in 1993, the term heritage wasn't used. It was races. What are the races in the... I'll just try to use this as little as possible, then switch over to heritage. What are the races in Dungeons & Dragons? Dwarf, elf, human, right? And pretty much these are the playable races, right? Now today we use the term heritage, and almost every professional product today, all the designers that really care about the growth of the hobby and being inclusive and having as many people come to the hobby as possible, are getting rid of the word race. Now in 1993, this really wasn't on them. This wasn't in their minds, but heritage is a huge part of the game, right? So from Tolkien, we get elf, we get human, we get dwarf. But the game is now starting to think about other heritages, Githyanki, and actually even playable races. What are additional playable races, right? And heritage also will be a very important now today in modern, now in 1993. Just the distinction of your player character having a separate race, a separate heritage, is a really big deal, and it's a major distinctor for Dungeons & Dragons, because the idea of playing non-human people doesn't really show up in a lot of other games, right? Now today we have a robust history for this, right? And gnomes and halflings will come in, kenders, these are all really big parts. Dragonborn, Warforged, Githyanki, there's just minotaurs, right? There are just dozens and dozens. There might be approaching 100 playable races, right? Kenku and Kitsuki, right? All kinds of playable races. Heritages for your player character are absolutely within the game, and the idea of what is it like to, as a human being, play someone who's not human, right? What is it like to have a completely different culture than the one I have? What is it like to have different values? What is it like to breed in different ways? What is it like, the way new members of this heritage are born, right? And all these things are explored within Dungeons & Dragons, and it's a massive part of the game, and it's truly, truly a big deal, because it's saying we really are going to try to be limitless in how you get to really explore what it means to be human and what it means to be beyond human, right? Or what it means to be someone who perhaps doesn't even have all the capabilities of a human, right? And so it's a huge social and cultural exploration within Dungeons & Dragons. That is a J. Scott Garibay clear history of the 20th year of Dungeons & Dragons in 1993. Please let me know your comments in the comment section below. Thank you very much for listening today, and please consider liking and subscribing. Take care.